Hello and welcome to a VSA Capital video. Today I'm delighted to be joined by Simon Clarke, CEO of American Lithium. I'm Ollie O'Donnell, Head of Research at VSA, and last time I spoke to the company, I spoke to Andy Bowring, the founder, and since then the company is up about 75%, now valued at over $300 million, and the company's with 12 million tons of lithium carbonate equivalent. It's now one of the biggest juniors by lithium resources in the world. So Simon, you've had a busy year. How are you doing?
I'm good, thanks, Ollie. Always good to see you and always good to catch up, and very much appreciate the support of VSA as always.
Great. Well, look, let's start on the acquisition. What did you buy, and what was the rationale for it?
Well, we bought a company called Plateau Energy. The rationale, as you pointed out, American Lithium has done pretty well from a stock price perspective over the last 12 to 18 months in particular. And I think a lot of that has been driven by the success we've had in Nevada at a time of, when critical minerals are in the spotlight in the US. And you had, first of all, the Biden administration very much supporting critical minerals, and now, the Trump administration, and now that's segued into Biden more and more pushing on the electric vehicle stuff side of things. So, you look at you look at how our stock price fared. The stock moved as high as $4 at one point. Very much tracking how a lot of the lithium stocks were doing, certainly earlier this year. And that gave us great currency to use to look at other things. We've always been extremely happy with our Nevada Claystone project, and we'll talk more about that. But we also, we like the idea of adding some additional assets, some additional diversity. And we'd looked at Plateau before. We looked at several other opportunities. We looked at some hard rocks in Canada, for example, but there's no spodumene converter up here yet, and the prices that we're looking at were expensive. So, we looked at Plateau, and it was a combination of a tired shareholder base that had some issues, that obviously gone through the lows in the lithium cycle, and we were just struck by how strong their underlying assets are. And in addition, they have an extremely strong technical team led by Dr. Lawrence Stephan, who have managed to move Falciani, which is their main lithium project in Peru, to battery grade. And we saw a lot of similarities between where we're at in Nevada, and bringing his expertise and that technical team in as well was a big piece of it. So, we really saw it as three assets: the Falciani lithium deposit, the Macasani uranium deposit, which is also very interesting, and then a really strong technical team that's achieved a lot. So that was our rationale, and we managed to time the acquisition for a time when their stock price had been fairly significantly beaten up over the last 12-18 months, and so from that perspective timing was very good.
And both of those assets that you mentioned, the lithium and the uranium, have quite detailed PEAs. Certainly the lithium, there's a huge amount of metallurgical test work that's gone into preparing that. So given that those are sort of technically more advanced assets, how should investors consider the company as a whole now?
Well, I think right now, a lot of the company's focus remains on Nevada, and part of that is, again, everything that's happening in the US. There's definitely a bit of a rush to develop domestic supply of critical minerals, and lithium being one of the most important. And that, so for the timing in Nevada, it's really good. And plus, we have some real environmental benefits at TLC, which we think make a lot of sense. And we're at that point where we're moving from maiden resource to a lot of extremely good process engineering work to looking to get a PEA out over the next several months, and at a robust PEA. We're not looking just to get to technical grade. We're looking to get to battery grade lithium there, and it'll, like the Peruvian PEAs, it'll be a robust PEA, which we think will then help us move through feasibility quickly. So, there's a lot going on in Nevada, and at the same time, there's been some uncertainties in Peru around elections. We are actually in the process of permitting a relatively large drill program, and we have a bunch of work planned for down there. Exact timing will just depend, once we see a little bit of more stability on the ground, then we'll launch into that. So yes, you're correct. I think Falciani might be the most advanced project we have in terms of where it's at, and if we were to move it through into production. But I think TLC can move pretty quickly, especially with a lot of the technical input from the guys that joined the company.
And I mean, going back to your share price, that's been quite sort of volatile during the period of acquisition. That probably links back to the fact that you have now acquired assets in Peru, and there's obviously a change of administration there, which got a lot of attention. And so, how are you planning on approaching doing business in Peru in that sort of slightly unknown paradigm?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question. And I think some of the volatility that we saw, and especially in recent times, I mean, there was a good run up in lithium stocks, as you know, in the first quarter, and then a bit of a consolidation in general. I think, we were probably hit a little bit harder initially, not only from the Peruvian uncertainty in the elections, but also, again, a pretty tired shareholder base in Plateau. And I think a number of those may have seen the merger as an opportunity to, sell stock that held for a while. So I think that's all come through. I think we've seen that now being dealt with, and the stock price is obviously performing a lot better recently. I think in terms of Peru, I mean, first of all, I'd say, Peru is a incredible geological environment. Obviously, it's the second largest copper producer on the planet, but a lot of precious metals as well. And they have a very favorable mining code and regime as it relates to, mining projects. So, from a GDP perspective and foreign income perspective, mining is critically important to them. So, we look at it, whatever regime is in power, it's hard to see them not wanting to continue to encourage and develop the mining side as a critical source of revenue for the country and its people. So, I mean, obviously markets hate uncertainty, and I think that's probably been the biggest thing. You've got this kind of election that's ended up on a bit of a knife edge with, one of the candidates having an extremely slim lead over the other candidate, and calls about, maybe there's been some election rigging, stuff like that. It's hard to comment. I think we stay out of that stuff. Our view very much is we will deal with whoever ends up winning the day. We think mining is going to be key to what they do. And they also have a parliament that is, largely centrist, maybe a little bit right-leaning for some of it, and how it's split. So I think whoever ends up in power is going to have to, bring forward policies that are more centrist to get them through parliament. And we know both sides, and I think our view is we will work with whoever's in power. Critically in Peru, a lot of what you do is at the community level. We've got extremely strong local community relations. We have a team of 18 people on the ground, including a very strong general manager, and that's really a big part of what they do. So we have 3 or 4 critical communities that we have really good relationships, and through that, we're, as I mentioned earlier, we've got our community pieces in place, and we're just finalizing permits for a fairly extensive drill program that we would like to launch. So for us, it's not really about necessarily who ends up being in power. It's just more about, once the situation stabilizes and there's clarity on which way the country is going, we'll work with whoever's there, and we continue to believe that Peru offers a lot of opportunity.
And just to clarify, those general managers and in-country personnel, they've come from Plateau Energy. They're all sort of legacy personnel that have got long relationships.
It's a great point. I mean, Plateau has been operating in the country for 15 years. And most of those staff have been involved for 5 to 10, including Raul, the general manager, who I think has been in place for 8 years. So definitely a very key guy, and we'll continue to work closely with the communities and move ahead. As I say, just looking for the whole process to be done and dusted and clarity on things, and we'll work with whoever is in power to advance those projects.
Excellent. And I suppose we could move on to the main project in Nevada now, but the backdrop's changed dramatically in the US over the past year, and the 100-day reviews just come out from the White House. How do you think that's going to affect your project?
I think it's all very encouraging. Again, before we did the Plateau acquisition, our stock price did move as high as $4, largely on what was happening in the US. It's an extremely large resource we have. Obviously, it's strategically located as America looks to develop domestic supplies of lithium and other battery metals to feed the EV side. As I know you're acutely aware, the US is highly dependent on China and other countries right now, especially for refined products. So I think strategically, it's very well located. I think what you've seen come out from the Democratic side is obviously there's this tightrope they have to walk, where you have a lot of environmentalists who've somewhat held a negative view of mining in the past, but also want to see the move to a new energy paradigm where you have the electric vehicles is a big piece of that, but solar, wind, and other generation. And so what is clearer and clearer is that you're not going to get there without more mining. So I think that's becoming accepted. I think you're starting to see that in that 100-day plan, but it's also clear that the projects that can demonstrate the best environmental background and fewest environmental issues and the ability to bring on production in a sustainable, environmentally friendly way are the ones that are likely to do the best out the gate. And I think that positions TLC really well. And my goal is not to knock our peers in any way, shape, or form, but there's been some highly publicized issues that some of the other claystone deposits have had with native grasses and sage grouse and other endangered species. The nice thing about TLC is it's located in the desert area of Nevada. We did our baseline work early on, which showed we have no endangered species or plants and no archaeological issues. And that's really helped us as we've moved into submitting plans of operation for further drilling and further work, at TLC. And that process has been moving ahead nicely. And a lot of that is because we did the environmental work early on. We've also had a good focus on water from an early stage. I mean, obviously, our goal is to adopt, whatever processing we do, we'll look to minimize the impact on water as well as the land. And as part of that, we secured water rights through acquiring a nearby ranch, which we continue to make sure the ranch has the right flowers and plants on it. And everything is done in the right environmental way. So we've secured water. We have no issues from a baseline perspective in terms of endangered species. And we've also brought in a group at an early stage to help us with life cycle assessment on any environmental impacts that would flow from whatever flow sheet we choose to adopt. So we've taken it really seriously out of the gate. And I think that positions us really well, especially at this juncture, where you have this mix of desire to move to the new economy with some concerns, certainly on the environmental side about mining. And so it's clear we're going to have to adopt, and we will adopt the best environmental practices out there.
And I guess the market really used those two claystone peers as lead indicators for American last year. So do you think you're now doing things differently enough from them that actually investors should probably disregard that and go back to looking at a sort of more the market fundamentals, underlying lithium prices and that sort of thing?
Yeah, I mean, I believe so. I mean, the fact that there's claystones have been permitted to move to mining is obviously positive, because one of the knocks on claystones in previous years is it's an unproven. No one has actually taken a claystone deposit into production. Well, you've had some pilot production and permitted mines. I think what it has shown us is that we have an extremely large deposit in Nevada, but how we've differentiated ourselves and not necessarily through any kind of active decision making, flipping a switch on, but we took the view early on that we wanted to be ahead of the game on the environmental side. We wanted to make sure there were no showstoppers for the company, and we wanted to make sure that we're seen to take the right steps early and address and embrace any issues that might be there before we move into feasibility, pilot production, and beyond. So I think yes, those two companies have shown you can go through feasibility, you can get mines permitted for claystones, etc. But I think what we're seeing is that's not enough. I think certainly at this juncture, you have to demonstrate early on your environmental bona fides, if you like, and I think we've done everything to try to ensure that we're in that position. So I think we're really well placed as we move forward. And we know, obviously, the government is very interested in Nevada supplies of lithium. And, a lot of what you're seeing in that 100-day plan just reinforces that.
And it's probably also worth pointing out that Falciani has taking a similar approach there. And one of the attractions is that there's a massive hydropower dam not too far away, which forms part of the PEA assumptions.
Absolutely. I mean, lots of hydropower, and it's in a part of Peru where there's, very heavy rainfall. I know you and I have spent some time together in Africa. There is a distinct rainy season, and it's a Macasani Plateau. It's 4,000 or 5,000 meter plateau, high in the Andes with significant rainfall. So lots of water supply. And for lithium in South America, water can be, as one of the biggest challenges, especially when you're looking at the brine side of things. So that's not an issue. As you mentioned, there's good green power. That we're very close to infrastructure on the road side, and the ability to move pretty rapidly to ports in southern Peru. So yes, you're right. When that PEA was put together, there was a real focus by the Plateau side on the green environmental side of things, maybe even ahead of the game, if you like, from where we are today. I commend them very much for putting that first and foremost in what they did. That, and I think their community relations are excellent aspects of the projects.
And in terms of other results that you've had out recently, obviously at Tonopah, the thing that sort of really excited people last year was the fact that you were getting 90% lithium recoveries in 10 minutes off an acid leach. You've now reported 80% recoveries off a chloride roast process. They also did some work at Falciani on a chloride roast, but they didn't choose that. So how are you running these sort of two flow sheets in tandem, and what should we be looking for in the coming months?
Yeah, I mean, it's really, TLC claystones are really interesting. I mean, they are, all these claystone deposits have their own nuances and their own individual characteristics. And I think what makes TLC unique is it's very weakly bound to the clays, which is why you see the ability, to leach the lithium out in as little as 10 minutes, which is a lot faster than any of the peer groups, certainly in the Nevada Claystone area. I mean, a lot of those can be, you know, multiple hours, and so as you bring in your flow sheet, the potential to, you know, minimize costs and have a more efficient flow sheet out the gate is there. So it's a really unique advantage. I think for us, you know, when we've been looking at it, we've made some great strides on the sulfuric acid leach approach, but we also wanted to look at other ways of separating out the lithium. And you know, as you can imagine, when you separate the leach that quickly, you also separate out a bunch of other things that you then have to deal with. You know, whether it's iron, aluminium, magnesium, that kind of stuff. And so you develop your flow sheet accordingly. What we decided to look at roasting, as you mentioned, it was very successful in the Falciani case, and we looked at it here, and so far it's been highly promising. You know, there's a lot of additional refinement we can do on it, but initial tests, you know, as we announced, have been really promising. And where they've been really promising is you know, pretty high recoveries, but you know, very minimal issues in terms of dealing with those other elements that come through. And so you get a very clean solution that you're actually then able to basically separate using water. So it's a very interesting process that you know, is definitely a viable alternative to leaching. We've also, you know, and again, this is driven by Lawrence, Dr. Stefan. I mean, he's a big fan of hydrochloric leaching as well, because you can, I think, as you know, you can actually reuse and you know, reclaim a bunch of the acid that you used there. And so from an environmental perspective, but also from a cost perspective, in certain circumstances, it can be a better approach. And there's also concerns that, you know, with what's going on in the mining industry, the cost of sulfuric acid may continue to escalate. So we wanted to look at other ways of doing it. And that initial work that we've also done in Peru, you know, the nice thing through, again, that acquisition is we have a technical team there, and use of a very friendly lab that can help us analyze and run a lot of different tests and short circuit the work that we do up here in the US. And so we've had some really good results on that as well. So I don't want to give anyone the impression that we're trying a bunch of different approaches. It's just this claystone, because of its unique qualities, actually allows the potential for a number of different routes. So what we're looking at and what we will do over the next 2 to 3 months here is refine the right approach, you know, using the metrics of cost, but also environmental footprint, in terms of deciding which is the right flow sheet to employ. I mean, none of it is binary. It's not that we're not going to get to battery grade. It's simply, you know, what's the cost to get it there and what are the environmental impacts, and we want to make sure we do the best. And our goal has always been to get to 4,000, you know, or less on an OPEX basis, and you know, we think we can do that. So we will refine we will choose one of these processes, again, based on economics and environment over the next, you know, 2 to 3 months here, and then we will run with that as we do more drilling at TLC, more bulk sampling, and that will segue into completing a PEA, which we would look to, you know, if everything goes according to plan, which it never does, it would be late this year. More likely, it would be early in Q1 next year that I think we'll have the PEA done. But again, we want. The reason, you know, we could move to a PEA now using, you know, because we've produced lithium carbonate, we could do it on a technical grade basis, but we want a robust, strong PEA that gets us to battery grade, that then helps us to move quickly through the feasibility phase and into pilot production. So, you know, that's why we're doing a lot of this work early and making sure we've got the right processes in place.
Yeah, and I think we could go into a huge amount more detail, but we should probably start wrapping up. So perhaps you could, just aside from the PEA say what the sort of key milestones are over the next 12 months, and also how you're funded to do that?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, we have 17.5 million in the treasury, pretty much as of today. And everything is through now in terms of the merger and all the costs associated with that, and everything you would expect. So, the focus for that capital is work in the field. TLC, again, in the next few months, very much finalizing the met work and choosing, the flow sheet. At the same time, we have a plan of operations filed that's been accepted by the BLM. Because of the environmental work we've done, they've moved straight into an environmental assessment, which is a much more straightforward process than a environmental impact study, which would have delayed things and involved a lot more environmental work. But again, because we did things early, we're able to fast track that. And then, so we're expecting approval on that plan of operations over the next 2 to 3 months here, which would then allow us to start drilling probably September time. That plan of operations envisages up to another 95 holes. What we want to do is to high grade. It's a very large resource, and there's some high grade sections, and we want to really high grade some of those for considerations of starter pits, that kind of stuff. And expand the resource further. There's parts of the acreage that we haven't done any drilling on, and so we'll do some infill, tighten up, high grade, but also look to expand the resource a little bit further. Also have some starter, as I say, some bulk sampling and areas where we'd potentially look for starter pits. So that's the next phase at TLC. So you'll see more news flow coming on the met side as we finalize flow sheets, and then on the drilling side. In Peru, we have a pretty large drill program at Falciani. Again, a lot of infill drilling there. A lot of that resource is in the inferred category. A lot of that happened because the auditor was, at the time, understandably pretty conservative. Falciani is a volcanic tooth, so it's a very unique form of mineralization. I mean, lithium is effectively hosted in this clear volcanic glass, if you like, that's already been heated. It's almost like a pegmatite that's been taken a couple of the ways through the process to produce lithium. And so it's a very pure near surface deposit. But because it was a new kind of way that they'd seen lithium hosted, they put a lot of the resource in the inferred category. So we will infill drill to take that more into M&I, and also to expand the resource there as well. We have also discovered 2 key areas which 5 or 6 kilometers away. I mean, if you imagine the land package in Peru is 90,000 hectares. It's very large. It's the Macasani Plateau. So 5 or 6 kilometers away, we have 2 key target areas which are very reminiscent of Falciani. So we want to do some exploration drilling there as well. And then we haven't touched much on the uranium side, but with what's happening in the uranium markets, there's some low-hanging fruit that we can do at Macasani. It's the 5th largest undeveloped uranium resource on the planet. And again, it's pure near surface, or I shouldn't say pure, but it's high in purity, near surface, good economics, strong PEA, but again, lots of ability through some infill and extension drilling to add to that resource further, and with a view for both those projects to move them into feasibility early next year. And we're not a uranium company. It's not my area of expertise. Through the acquisition, we did bring on board Ted O'Connor, who's been in senior positions with Cameco, and understands the uranium business inside out. And so he's our QP, but he's a bit of an expert on the Macasani side. And we think there's lots of value we can build in the coming months on that for the shareholders, whether we ultimately sell it or spin it out. But we've had a lot of lowball offers already on that asset that we're not interested in. We want to maximize value for shareholders. So sorry, a long-winded answer to your question, Ollie, but there's lots of things happening and lots of news flow coming up in the coming months.
Great. Well, plenty to look out for. And thanks very much for your time, Simon. Great to talk to you.
No problem. Thank you, Ollie. Take care.